So we're entering into the Galleria Borghese through the park. This is the park of Villa Borghese, the park that used to be just wildlife outside of Rome, outside the ancient walls of Rome, until the aristocratic family of the Borgheses, who gave Rome many of its noble figures, as in figures of the nobility, and popes built their villa and gardens here. And here we are on a beautiful day. You will be updated further on as we venture into the Galleria Borghese and take a look at the beautiful sculptures of Gian Lorenzo Bernini there. Final look at the lake here at the entrance. So, we're looking at Bernini's David in the Galleria Borghese of Rome. And I think this is an excellent way to understand much about Baroque sculpture, especially if you compare it to Michelangelo's David, which is standing in Florence. I don't know if you can hear me properly, but I'll get the microphone closer to me. So, if you look at Michelangelo's David, the one who's standing, sort of ethereal, larger than life, a superhuman figure, sort of made to look like a Greek column in a way, and not really engaged in any action. He's just sort of standing there, ready to move, sort of internalizing the emotion. That's the classical Renaissance style. However, here we have Bernini's Baroque sculpture. It's an entirely different moment in time. It's an entirely different way of configuring the art piece. So we have a David who is fully engaged in the moment of throwing his sling, his rock, at Goliath. And there's nothing internalized about this at all. If you look at the expression on Bernini, on the Bernini's David, with his biting down on his... Look how angry he is, concentrated, he is full motion. There's nothing internalized about this at all. This is dramatic and powerful, very Baroque. It's all about theatricality and pathos, none of the internalized emotion and sort of classicism of the Renaissance. Look at the level of motion. In a way, Michelangelo's David is far more static, but this one, if you look at this torsion and the diagonal lines in it, you see that it's all about motion. The tension in the muscles, it's so powerful. You often hear scholars say that they won't step in front of Bernini's David because they're afraid that the sling will actually hit them in the face. Look at the grace and power and tension of those muscles. It's something quite extraordinary. You see, every angle you look at it from, you catch something different. The diagonal lines, the tension, the muscles. But of course, the main thing about it that really makes this worth its time is the expression. Nothing like the ethereal inner calm of Michelangelo's Renaissance classical David. This is pure concentration. There's nothing godlike about this David. This is a human figure. And this is all about Bernini's Baroque style. Nothing ethereal, nothing godlike. This is a human being caught in a moment of intense concentration and struggle. And this is the view from in front. Look at that. You actually are worried that you might get hit. Now we're looking at what is considered to be Bernini's masterpiece, Apollo and Daphne, a sculpture that is so revered that even the art historian from the 600s, Bellori, who hated Bernini, had to include this sculpture among the most important ones contained in the Galleria Borghese in his history of Italian art. Now this is pretty much Baroque style exemplified. You have all the complicated and intricate torsion and spiral of the figures, which is far less sort of straight and static than the classical style that you have both in the Renaissance and afterwards with neoclassicism. It also has a lot of elaborate features, most notably the hair of the figures and the branches and leaves at the bottom of Daphne's feet. Now, this is coming from an episode in Ovid's Metamorphosis, the classical Greek mythological story of Apollo and Daphne. Apollo fell in love with Daphne after he was hit by a arrow of Cupid, who at the same time, as a sort of trick he was playing against Apollo, also shot Daphne, the nymph, with an opposite, a leaden arrow to make her fear him instead of falling in love with him. So he's chasing her, but she flees in fright and terrified, in the moment of her capture by Apollo, cries out to her father, Peneus, to let her escape this torment. So in that moment, her father transformed her into a laurel tree, a bay leaf tree, and since then, Apollo always took care of that tree and worshipped the laurel, which ever since, became the symbol of Apollo, the laurel wreath that he would wear around his head, and that was also, famously adopted by the Caesars of Rome. Let's do a little. One thing you'll notice about this is the movement, like we were talking about with the David of Bernini. This Baroque style, and Bernini in particular, is all about movement. There's none of that classical staticity that you find in Michelangelo. You see, Apollo is caught mid-run in the moment of capturing her, and she too is caught mid-movement, reaching out, her feet trying to lift up from the ground, but already stuck. Why? Because this is the precise moment captured in time when she begins her transformation into a tree. And it's pretty incredible. Look at this. Look at the fact that her outreached hands are starting to transform into branches already. And her feet, look at her toenails, already starting to turn into roots. Is incredibly impressive. One thing I always found curious about this is Apollo's expression. You see, he is caught halfway between lust, but also a sudden realization that something's terribly wrong, and a sadness that he has actually lost the woman he loves. That is not a happy face, and you should compare it with the face of Pluto and Hades in the next statue we'll see. Daphne is caught in a moment of horror at her sad fate. Look at those hands. And the hair. One detail I always loved as well, another one, there's so much to love in this statue, is Apollo's hand. So light. He's captured her, but unlike, and this I'd like you to compare in a bit, look at his hand, how light it is. So what we have here is the third of the triptych of Bernini statues I wanted to show you today. This is the Rape of Proserpina from, again, Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's a classical Greek/Roman story of mythology when the daughter of the goddess of agriculture, Demetra, or Ceres, also known as Proserpina and Persephone in Greek, is stolen by Hades or Pluto, the god of the underworld, who saw her and fell in love with her. Now, What I love about this is how it contrasts with Apollo and Daphne, which you can just see in my last live tweet on Twitter. So there you had a moment in which a god had actually fallen in love with a nymph and was trying to catch her, and in the moment of her capture, something had changed. She was transforming into a plant, a tree. And there you could see the expression on Apollo's face of sadness. It was a love tinged with that melancholia, understanding that he'd lost something that he so deeply wanted. Here you have a completely different expression on the god's face. Look at it. That is unbridled lust and glee. It's almost gross and creepy, because similarly to Daphne, Proserpina / Persephone's expression is one of horror and tears. Now, there is none of the delicacy here that you have in Apollo and Daphne. You have instead something far more violent. See how he lifts her off her feet. And now that is a detail that I've always found delightful about this. Look at how the fingers go into the flesh. That's a virtuosistic touch. Look at that. That is flesh turned into marble and vice versa. Which other sculptures could have come up with that? And you have the usual movement and elasticity you get in these kind of compositions. There you have the guard dog of Hades, Cerberus, looking in 3 different directions. Again, you have these this movement implied just in the 3 directions the beast is looking in. Look at the incredible anatomical detail of Hades and Pluto. And again you have all that movement like in the David and the Daphne. You see spiral structure, diagonal lines, very Baroque, very intricate. Again, the hair, look at the detail in that hair, the beard, all curls, almost like a Poseidon. And even further diagonal lines in the way Proserpina pushes his face away. But I want to go back to the detail of the hands sinking into the flesh, because this is one of the greatest things you'll ever see. This is pure virtuosism from Bernini.
Lei che geme, la lacrima enorme che si dà via dal basso,